Hello everyone, this is Shannon from That's So Po, and today I'm talking about my anticipated releases for the first quarter, January, February, and March of 2022. This is my first time doing an anticipated releases video, but I'm really excited to do it because I really want to start paying a little bit more attention to new releases since it matters a lot for the authors that people are talking about and reading their books right when they come out. And I want to thank a lot of my friends that I reached out to who gave me advice for how to even find new releases and really what resources they use. I want to mention all of them in this video that I reached out to because they are such great resources for me in terms of seeing what new releases they're picking up. So I want to recommend them to you as well in case you're interested in new releases. So for SFF, Angela at Literature Science Alliance and Kristen at Kristen L. SFF Reader are really great at picking up and reading and reviewing a ton of new releases. For romance and nonfiction, my go-to people are Cynthia at Book Whimsy and Kazen at Always Doing. They are always reading really cool romances and nonfiction, as well as a bunch of other things, and they're keeping their eye out for what's going on in those genres. And then just some booktubers that read everything under the sun, including SFF romance nonfiction and all sorts of other things like middle grade and picture books and so many different things. Becca at Read Becca and Rachel at Kalinati are just such great resources. So all of these booktubers I'm going to have linked below. If you're interested in new releases, these are where I get a ton of the things that end up on my TBR, and they all gave me advice for how to find new things to put on this anticipated releases video. So today I'm going to talk about 15 books. I did have to narrow it down, but I came up with 15 that I'm really looking forward to and definitely am going to try to pick up. I'm going to ask my library to order all of these, and hopefully I will get them not too long after they are released so that I can read them and see if they're as good as they sound. So the only January release on my list is Goliath by Tochi Onyebuchi, which is supposed to be published on January 25th of 2022. And as a note, all of these dates I'm grabbing from the Goodreads page on them, so I'm assuming that these are US publishing dates and very likely open to change, especially since there are some supply chain issues right now that are delaying some books. But this is the only one that is expected to be published in January. I have read Riot Baby by Tochi Onyebuchi, which was a really beautiful, almost poetic novella that had a lot of great discussions of racism and the prison industrial complex and so many great things. So I'm very interested in reading more by Onyebuchi. Goliath is a sci-fi that is set in the 2050s, and in this world you have basically everybody who has money and power has left Earth to go live in space colonies, but they're still siphoning off resources from Earth, and the people left on Earth are really scavenging, just barely struggling, trying to survive. So it sounds like this book is going to have a lot of really interesting discussions about racism and class and privilege and all sorts of good things, and I very much trust Onyebuchi to do a good job of that. Then moving on to February, we've got Solimar by Pam Munoz Ryan, publishing on February 1st of 2022. I've heard of Pam Munoz Ryan before, but I actually haven't read any of her works. This is a middle grade fantasy that is about a girl, Solimar, who on her quinceañera ends up gaining some powers. She gains the power to predict a near future, as well as becomes the protector of monarch butterflies. And these powers are wonderful, but she ends up needing to be powerful because her kingdom is invaded and everybody that she knows is taken prisoner by the invading kingdom, and she has to fight to save them. So it sounds like it's going to be a really great epic fantasy, but in middle grade form. Another middle grade releasing on February 1st is Maisie Chen's Last Chance by Lisa Yi. This is a contemporary middle grade about a girl, Maisie Chen, who goes with her mom back to kind of her mom's hometown where her grandparents are because her granddad is sick. And her family are the only Asian Americans in the whole town. And she has to kind of deal with understanding her family's history, and she spends a lot of time time in their family restaurant. And so it's all about learning about family history and heritage and culture, and it sounds just up my alley. Then a poetry collection also releasing on February 1st that I'd like to try is Broken Halves of a Milky Sun by Ayun Nin. So Ayun Nin is an Angolan poet, artist, and activist who is a refugee and living in Denmark. This poetry collection sounds really, really neat. Their work is being compared to Natalie Diaz, and I really love her poetry. So I'm excited about this. It sounds like it's going to have a lot of themes of colonialism and of race and of gender. Nin is queer, and so it's just going to have like a lot of those themes that I look for in my poetry. So I'm excited to give this one a try. On February 8th, The Impossible City, a Hong Kong memoir by Karen Chung, is being released. And this sounds, again, just right up my alley. Karen Chung is a journalist, and in this book, she combines a memoir of her own experiences growing up in Hong Kong with sort of a journalistic approach to talking about what's going on in Hong Kong, especially talking about a lot of the counterculture and youth protests that are going on there, and really weaving that in together. I absolutely love memoirs, and I especially love memoirs that tackle cultural, historical, and political themes. So this is something that I think is just going to be so good. Also on February 8th is A Comb of Wishes by Lisa Stringfellow, which is a middle grade contemporary fantasy about a young Caribbean girl who finds a magical comb on the beach, which ends up belonging to a pretty vengeful mermaid who offers her a wish for a price. This sounds like it's going to be such a great contemporary middle grade fantasy, which I really, really love. And also it's going to be dealing with grief because the main character has lost her mother. And I always love middle grade that tackles some of those heavier issues because they do it so well. So I think I'm going to love this one. On February 15th, Bitter by Akwaeke Emeze is being released, and I think a lot of us are excited about this because this is the prequel to Pet. Pet was released maybe 2 years ago, and it's such a good book. It's a YA, but it has sort of a middle grade feel in the gentleness in the story that is really just absolutely fantastical and beautiful. And this is the prequel to Pet, and it is the story of Pet's mom, Bitter, when she was a teenager and going to art school and also trying to figure out if she wanted to get involved with the revolution that was happening due to social injustices. Akwaeke Emeze always deals with some really deep political and social themes, so I'm sure that this is going to be such a good read. Then the last book in February I'm looking forward to is Golden Girl by Reem Faruqi, which is being published on February 22nd. This is a contemporary middle grade about a Pakistani American girl who has a real love of shiny things and maybe a little bit of kleptomania. And she's trying to deal with this problem, but she ends up having a bigger problem in her life when her dad is falsely accused of a crime that he didn't commit, and she needs to help out and make things right. I love contemporary middle grades, and this sounds just so good. Then moving on to March, we have All the Horses of Iceland by Sarah Tolmie, which is being published on March 1st. This sounds fantastic. It is basically a historical fantasy that imagines a mythical origin to the horses in Iceland following a Norse trader in, I think, the Middle Ages, traveling the Silk Road. It sounds like it's going to be really beautifully written. I've heard that it's almost literary in its prose style, and I just love historical fantasy, so I think I will also really love this one. Also on March 1st is Dream of the Divided Field by Yan Yi. This is a poetry collection, and poetry is always a little hard for me to figure out what I'm going to think of it ahead of time, but this one has some really cool themes. So it sounds like these poems are going to be about identity and about body and about transition, and it just sounds like these poems might have a lot of really interesting things that they're talking about, so I'm hopeful. Then on March 8th, one I think I'm going to absolutely love is Red Paint, an ancestral autobiography of a Coast Salish punk by Sacha Lapointe. So Sacha Lapointe is a Coast Salish indigenous artist who grew up in the Pacific Northwest loving punk. And so this is a memoir of her life and her experiences, talking about her tribe, her ancestors, kind of that experience growing up and loving punk. And I am so excited about this, especially because this year I read Saigon by Phuc Tran, which was such a great book about a Vietnamese immigrant to the US who fell in love with punk and just sort of that experience. So I think that maybe I have a thing for books with people who fell in love with punk as they were growing up. I'm really excited because I love memoirs, so this sounds awesome. Also on March 8th is The Intersectional Environmentalist, How to Dismantle Systems of Power to Protect People and Planet by Leah Thomas. This, just from the title, sounds awesome. But really, I've heard quite a bit about how a lot of climate change is very inequitable in the way that it affects people, where it's very much the marginalized people who are poorer or discriminated against, the non-global north, as well as within the global north, people who are, really struggling to get by, who are discriminated against by systems, who are most affected by the changes to the planet. So I've been interested in this topic for a while, and this sounds like it's a great primer on what's going on and how to kind of be a little bit more activist about it. So I'm really interested in learning from this book. Another social justice nonfiction publishing on March 8th that sounds great is Read Dangerously, The Subversive Power of Literature in Troubled Times by Azar Nafisi. And this is all about how reading can be an act of resistance. And she provides not just a discussion of the way that literature can be that act of resistance, but also a reading list of books to pick up. So this sounds just like the sort of thing that I'm going to find truly fascinating. Then on March 15th is Kundo Wakes Up by Saadzi Hossain, which is a science fantasy mystery that takes place in sort of a technology-infused future in Bangladesh, where the city that Kundo lives in is sort of falling into the sea, and also his estranged wife and many other people have gone missing, and he needs to figure out what's going on, and it seems like maybe the jinn are involved. This just sounds like a great SFF book to pick up, so I'm interested in giving it a try. And lastly, on March 22nd is The Shame Machine, Who Profits in the New Age of Humiliation by Cathy O'Neil. I definitely want to pick up anything that Cathy O'Neil publishes. She wrote Weapons of Math Destruction, which is just such an excellent book about the way that AI is used to harm a lot of people. And so I'm very interested in this new book that she's coming out with, which is sort of a social and political analysis of the way that shame is used, the sort of shame industry, to kind of control people's behavior. I really trust that any analysis she does is going to look at the heart of some of these ways that power is misused, and the way that people are manipulated by those in power. So I think this is going to be quite a good read. Okay, so those are 15 of the books that I am really looking forward to that are being published in the first quarter of 2022. If you guys are interested in these as well, or if you have other books that you're looking forward to in January, February, March of 2022, let me know what's on the horizon for you, what you're thinking about, any of that stuff, or if you know of any good resources for paying attention to what's coming out, I'd love to hear about that too. Just leave me a comment down below.